Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotors in a 2019 Audi A4. First thing we need to do is get these lug caps off. Audi uses these little caps on here, and the cap puller is usually in the trunk, but it's missing. So I'm just using these two little hook tools. We just need to pull each one of these caps off. And then we can take these off. This is a 17 millimeter. Now there's a few different versions of Audi A4s, and I believe this is just the A4 Titanium, and this has the 2-liter engine. This is the one that's got this tension spring here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is pop this spring off. There we go. All right, now I'm also going to use a smaller pry bar in here to push the caliper piston back in so that we can make room for the new thicker pads and of course the thicker rotors. Now before we do that, it's important that you pop the hood and take a look at the master cylinder to make sure that there's enough room for that additional fluid that we're pushing backwards up into that reservoir. So let's go do that now. Now the master cylinder reservoir is located right underneath here, and you can see there's this little cutout so that you can inspect and take a look at the level of the fluid. Ours is just underneath the max level, and so we've got enough room to push that caliper piston back. A lot of people ask me if you need to take this cap off when doing so. I usually don't, but this manual says that you're supposed to relieve some of the pressure when pushing that back. Now I'm just going to let it sit here loosely to allow any of that pressure or air to escape. I don't really think that's all that necessary, but the manual recommends it on this vehicle, so I'm going to do that. The reason I don't usually take it off is because brake fluid is hygroscopic, meaning that it absorbs moisture, even the moisture in the air. So the less you can expose that brake fluid to air, the better. But it looks like we're in good shape. Let's go push that caliper piston back in. Just remember that you do need to double check this and top this off once you're done. All right, so now we know that we've got plenty of room to push this caliper piston back in without overflowing and making a big mess up above. Now, as an alternative method, you could take this rubber cap off and crack open the bleeder screw to push the old fluid out through the bleeder as you push the caliper piston back in, and that's one way to cycle through your brake fluid as well. Just note that you may have to bleed the brakes once you're done, because there is a possibility that air could also get in through that bleeder if you don't close it quick enough. The other thing is, if you are in a rusty area, just note that these bleeder screws are pretty notorious for breaking off and ruining your day, and it just makes it into a much bigger job. The way that I'm going to do it, we will not have to bleed the brakes. Now I like to push the caliper piston back in before taking it off. You could also just remove the caliper and then use a caliper compression tool to push that back in. I like to use the little pry bar method, wedging this in through here up against the edge of the pad. Slowly pry that back in. Nice, slow, steady pressure. And that looks good. All right, now we can take out these little plastic caps so that we can get to the slide pin bolts. All right, and then with a 7 millimeter hex, we're going to loosen and remove these two caliper slide pin bolts. All right, now we can take off the brake caliper, and I'm just going to try to hook this on up above. Just kind of let it sit up here, and you can see right here the little sensor wire is broken. It's caused our brake light to be on. The little sensor right here is worn away, kind of what we expected to see, so that's good. All right, and then we'll take off the outside pad, and then the inside pad, just pull that out of the caliper like so. Again, this is the one that would normally have the sensor attached, but it's completely worn off or broken off, and we'll take care of that next. So it looks like the sensor is just clipped into this little metal bracket right here. We'll slide that out. All right, I'm also going to just unplug the sensor right here. Just pushing this tab and pull. There we go. And then this part of the sensor, or this part of the clip, there's just this little plastic tab. You can break this one off because it's trash, and then just turn that 90 degrees, and then it'll just come right out of that carrier or that holder. And this is, again, the remnants of our old sensor. All right, we're also going to be changing the rotor, so we do need to take off these two 21 millimeter head bolts here that hold this caliper bracket on, or they call it the carrier bracket. Just using the high torque Milwaukee here with a 21 millimeter stubby socket from Capri Tools. All right, I just pushed the caliper a little bit farther back to give us a little bit more room in here, hopefully. Nope. All right, can't quite fit the impact in here. I'm just gonna use a breaker bar. See if I can loosen this one here. All right, we got it loose. Good idea to have one hand on this while you take this out. Otherwise, this will drop to the ground. All right, now in order to get this rotor off, we've got one screw holding that on, and that I believe is a T30. We got it. Now some of those impact screwdrivers have an attachment for a specific bit, and that might actually be nice to be able to impact that a few times before taking it out, but we got it, so not a big deal. Now sometimes these rotors will pop right off, and sometimes they just don't, and you need to use the new and improved Rotor Remover 9000. This is also called the Small Tanya Harding. Just give it a whack or two and it should come right off. There we go. All right, before I put the new rotor on, I'm gonna clean this hub pretty well with a wire wheel just to try to get some of this corrosion and rust off of there. Now, if you're gonna use a wire wheel with a drill, just make sure you wear some safety glasses. Now I'm also going to brush the surface of the hub with this Permatex copper anti-seize. That will prevent the new rotor from getting stuck. Mostly focus here on the center part. That seems to be where they get stuck the most. Now we also need to clean the surface of the new rotor before we put it on. A lot of times those are packed in oil to prevent them from rusting, so just a little bit of brake cleaner here on a paper towel and wipe that off. All right, then we can put the new rotor on. Just line up that tapered hole. And then we'll put that little torque screw back in. That is, of course, if you didn't have to drill it out. We'll just snug this little torque screw. Don't get too crazy on this, just make it snug. All right, now I'm just gonna clean up this bracket a little bit before we put this back on. It's just a little bit easier to do with it off the vehicle. Now before we put that bracket on, I'm just going to put a little bit of this medium strength Permatex blue thread locker on these caliper bracket bolts. Just kind of helps hold those in place and prevents them from backing out on their own. Now make sure these still have the locking washers on them as well. Then we can torque these bolts to 190 Newton meters. All right, here's the inside pad, which has got the sensor wire right here attached. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the caliper first. And before I do, I'm gonna brush the back just around the base where this slides in with a little bit of this silicone ceramic extreme. It's this Permatex stuff. It seems to cut down on some of the vibrations that cause brake noise. It also helps this slide in a little bit easier. We'll just put a little bit here on the base where that piston will make contact. That should be good. And then we just have to put that right over here. Just line that up and just push it right into the caliper piston. I should hold it in place. Whoop. There we go. Now remember, this little cord just goes right up into this little metal part right here, this little metal holder. Now this part, you just have to turn it sideways and then rotate it, push down on this little plastic tab, and then it snaps it in place just like that. Now we still have to connect that, but I'm gonna drop the caliper back down before I do. So before I do that, I'm gonna put on the outside pad. All right, now the outside pad just sits right there. Really easy, and I'm gonna put a little bit of this same stuff here. Now we have some nice rubberized shims on here, but this little thin coating of this silicone ceramic extreme seems to really help cut down on some of the vibrations that cause noise. You know, I know I could also brush it right here, but just make sure you don't get any of that stuff on the friction surface of the pad material. If you do, wipe it off. But this is now ready to bring back down. I'm going to take off this caliper hook and carefully bring this back down over this outside brake pad. just like that. And now we can reconnect that brake sensor wire. That looks good. Now for these two caliper slide pin type of bolts, I'm just going to put a little bit of this silicone caliper grease on these slide pins. But these are not like your traditional slide pins where they're in like a cavity. These just go through a little rubber bushing, and I just want to make sure that they're nice and smooth and they're not going to bind up. So let's just go ahead and just pop those through. Same with this one here. Let's just get these started real quick by hand. Just gonna make these snug with the Milwaukee real quick. And the torque spec on these is 30 Newton meters. And then remember, we need to put these plastic caps back in to cover those. Now our kit came with the new retainer spring here for the outside, and it looks like it's pretty close, but it is slightly different. So I'm gonna give it a try, but if this doesn't work, I'm gonna go back to the old one. A lot of times the replacement kits, the springs don't quite do it. They don't quite match up perfectly, but let's see if we can make this one work. So it just hooks on down there. Yeah, this one is, oh yeah, you can see the end of that. You see how it's got like a burr on it. It's not even going in through the hole. Let me try to file that down and make this work. You know, I got these pads and rotors at my local O'Reilly, and this is their Import Direct brand, and they're usually pretty good, but this is a good example. I've not had good luck with these springs on a lot of other Volkswagens and stuff, and here's a perfect example. This little burr is preventing me from being able to even put it in through that hole in the caliper. I'm gonna give it a little try here. I'm gonna try to file this down just a little bit. Maybe that'll be enough to make it work. If not, we can always just go back with the old spring. Yeah, there, now it's going in at least. All right, it might work. The trick is just to hold them in and then get this pried to the other side there. So let's see if we can do that. Yeah, that is not wanting to work. I'm not too surprised by that. We're just gonna go back with the old one. These OEM springs are just so much better. Pry this one on the other side. Yeah, see, that's gonna work. That other one is just not gonna work. Now, if you're in a really rusty area, you might consider getting some OEM replacement hardware if needed. Now, before you head out, just make sure that you step on the brake pedal a few times, which will push this caliper piston back out, pressing these pads up against the rotor where they need to be. Now, when you do that, don't push the pedal all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in your master cylinder. Just halfway a few times until it feels firm, and you should be good to go. And don't forget to double check the master cylinder fluid level when you're done, and tighten that cap before you close that hood. I hope you like this video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. And of course, I'll get a link in the description to some of the parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck.